Every tree has roots, every life has branches, and every adoption has a story. Some stories begin with questions, some begin with loss. All of them are rooted in love and the search for connection. This is Janet Monroe, and this is Roots and Branches Adoption Stories, a podcast where real stories take root and grow. Because the more we share, the more we understand, and understanding helps us grow. Now, here's Janet Monroe.
Hello, and welcome to Roots and Branches Adoption Stories, where we explore the lives shaped by adoption, the roots that anchor us, and the branches that grow from them. This is our radio edition, and I'm so glad you're here. Tonight, I'm joined by my co-host, Matt Stafford. Matt grew up in foster care and was permanently placed, but never adopted. That distinction shaped his identity, his sense of belonging, and ultimately the work he does today, advocating for young people who've been impacted by the system. We've already shared Matt's story on this platform, and his insight, both lived and learned, adds a vital presence to these conversations. Matt understands adoption, not just from the outside looking in, but from the inside, where questions of identity, trust, and family live. Matt, I'm really grateful to have you here with me.
It's a pleasure to be a part of this, Janet, and to co-host with you. It's wonderful to meet you, Dolly, and I can't wait to hear your story and then how we can help people that's listening to us through our conversation.
And that's the whole aim, isn't it?
Yes.
So before I begin tonight, I want to dedicate tonight's episode to the women, especially the young women who were not given a choice. Women who were shamed, silenced, coerced, and told they were unworthy. Women whose babies were taken, whose voices were dismissed, and whose grief was expected to disappear. So this episode is for you, and you'll know why once you start listening. Our guest today is Di Riddell, author, speaker, Toastmaster, and survivor of forced adoption practices in 1960s Australia. Di's life story includes childhood abuse, sexual violence, coerced adoption, decades of silence, and ultimately extraordinary healing, reunion, and purpose. Today we're talking not just about adoption, but about the shame, resilience, reclaiming your voice, and what healing can look like even decades later. Today we're talking about what happens when stories are buried and what becomes possible when they're finally told. I'd like you to meet Di Riddell. And Di, before we talk about adoption, can you describe the environment you grew up in and how it shaped your sense of self?
Oh, thank you, Janet, and thank you for welcoming me to your show, and hello to Matt. I'm sorry, what was the question? How it shaped my...
How it shaped your sense of self?
My sense of self was very much buried under the drama of my life. I grew up in a violent alcoholic household. That was my father, and what he said went. And there's no, with an alcoholic, there's no shaping and you can't second guess. If you gave them potato and peas tonight for dinner, tomorrow night they'll want pumpkin and beans. So, they will have whatever's not there, and that's what they'll want. So that uncertainty and that fear and the violence, and him telling me that I was not worth it, a waste of space, not worth educating, and just get out of the way, because you'll never amount to anything. So, growing up with that, that left me as a young teenager with absolutely no self-esteem, no self-confidence, and no self-worth. So that really set me up for disaster, because I was victim, 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 just screaming there, waiting for a perpetrator to come and pick me up. And that's exactly what happened.
Where was your mother in all this?
My mother was very quiet, and when they married, she was a teetotaler, and she had absolutely no idea of how to handle him, and she lived a life of misery. And as a youngster, I thought that she was weak, but as I've grown old, more mature, lots more mature, and dealt with life, I can see that she just simply did not have the skills. There was nowhere for women to turn to apart from their minister of religion. There was nowhere for women to go to. There was certainly no welfare. And she just lived a life of fear.
Mm.
So, she shielded me to a great degree. And a lot of the violence was towards her, and implied that if I did the wrong thing, not only would I cop it, but so would Mum. So it was that thing of trying to shield her as well, while she was trying to shield me, neither of which was working.
So you did not have a childhood.
I didn't have a what?
A childhood. You became an
No.
adult.
I mean, I'm starting to write something now. I'm in a U3A is the University of Third Age here in Australia. It's not a university as such, but it's somewhere that people over 55 can go, and they have enormous courses. So one of the ones that I'm doing is Write Your Life Story. And so I'm looking at it, picking out the bits that are good, that I can remember. And that's a whole different slant, because when I wrote and self-published my first story, which was Beyond Abuse, that has all the awful stuff and the steps that I took to move forward. This time I'm looking completely different to something nice that happened. Some of those there were some good points, but there weren't too many of them. And I can't really recall, I don't think, any that involved my father. My mother and my grandmother and an aunt. Yes.
What decade were you growing up in, Di?
The 50s. I was born in 1947.
Okay. All right. So I'm the same decade as you. I was born in 49, but had a totally different upbringing than what you did. At 16, your life changed forever.
That's how it is. I can't, I have no intentions of spending my life hiding behind that now. But back then, I didn't think I had a choice. I thought I was just completely worthless.
So you said at 16 that your life changed forever. What happened, and what was society's response at that time?
Yes, well, that wasn't good either. So Saturday night, we used to go to a local dance, and there was a guy there that I thought was, he's pretty good. And he paid me a little bit of attention. And then one evening he said to me, I'd like to drive you home, and I'll give you a night to remember. Now, in my childish mind, my young teenage mind, seeking love, thought that meant going to sit under the moonlight and a peck on the cheek. But that didn't happen. We went out to the car, he took off, and I heard a noise and turned round, and there were two other fellows on the floor, on the floor in the back seat of his car. They took me to an isolated area where I was raped.
I am so sorry.
So, coming back, of course, that just gave my father more ammunition. My eldest brother was the one person that could control Dad. And I went to him, and he said, well, yeah, you've been incredibly stupid, but we're still going to have to tell Mum and Dad I'll go with you. So he went with me. So I was sent off. Do you want me to continue with the story?
Yes, please.
Yep. So I was, completely annihilated. I wasn't allowed to stay in the house. And my brother secured a spot for me, I suppose you'd call it, where I was sent to an isolated acreage on the outskirts of Brisbane to a doctor and his wife's home. It was on an acreage. They had two small children, and I was there as the unpaid housekeeper and for 24/7 babysitter. The doctor was my attending doctor, and my prenatal care was, you'll find out when you get there.
I had,
So,
I
there
was
was no
sent,
support. It was all rejection. It was all just shut you away, keep you out of sight because you were a disgrace to the, to everyone in your world. And then after I had the baby was whisked away on sight. I was not allowed to see, hear, or touch. Um, and and then the baby was just adopted out. So then I was just told to get up and get on with life. The welfare workers of the day stood over me, two mature women with the adoption papers and a pen, and I was told, screamed at to sign it because they told me that I was a disgrace to myself, the universe, and everything in between, and that I should go nursing and get out of society's way because no decent man would ever want me. And I believed that. So off I went nursing, and I became officious and efficient, which fits in with, my background and moving in there because I thought that's where I was going to be forever. Something else happened and I fell pregnant a second time, again because I was still thinking that I was worthless. And the welfare workers had, a bigger picnic the second time. And then I continued on with my nursing, and then I met my husband. He was just a lovely man, and that was a bit of a mixture. He was 16 years older than me. He had 4 children aged 10 to 16, and I was 24. By that time, I gained a lot of confidence through my nursing, and I thought, well, if I can run a hospital ward, I can run 4 kids and work. What's the problem? Not quite that easy. The 4 children don't behave like patients in a hospital bed do. But we had a wonderful marriage, and then the following year after we got married, we had a son together. So, my life was very, very full. And sort of moving in then, my husband was in the sugar industry, going up his corporate ladder. And I was expected to entertain and do things that I had absolutely no experience in, whatever. But gradually I grew, and then an opportunity came for me to join Toastmasters. And I didn't volunteer. I was sort of volunteered into it. And that really started my personal growth. So I really jumped into it and did all sorts of things, started to climb up their leadership ladder and did really well. And lots of other stuff happened in the meantime. And then the next crucial thing was 2002, Les passed away. Now, dealing with my grief led me on a 25 years this year, 23 years since Les passed, personal development journey, which has just really made me the woman that I am today because I had the guts to get up and have a crack. That's how the first book evolved. I was also involved in national speakers, and there was somebody there who said to me, I think you've got a book in your die. And I thought, there's a bit of a difference between writing a 5 to 7 minute speech for Toastmasters and writing a book. So, that was quite the journey. So I've travelled through and done, just an enormous amount of material. And in 2018, it was when my second book came out, which was a 10-year journey on from beyond abuse with, what had happened in the interim. The day that went live on Amazon, something just went off in my head. It just exploded. And I thought, I'm ready to search. So I had been given some information from another friend. So off I went into the Children's Services Department, which is the government department, and they gave me the details because I'd buried all this stuff so deeply I couldn't remember. And it took a lot of digging and self-searching for me to be able to dig that back up again. So they gave me the dates. And then I went to another organisation called Post Adoption Support Queensland, and they help you with the finding and with emotional support. And they were just incredible. So and if you're over 65, I think it is, there's an age thing, they sort of bump you up the list a bit. I suppose they think you might fall off the perch, I'm not sure. But anyway, so I got in early, and within 4 weeks, they'd found my daughter. I had a son and a daughter. And they found Sue first, and she lives in Brisbane, which is...
Was your daughter the oldest?
Yeah, same city as me. just on the other side of town. So that was just incredible how that all unfolded, because Sue agreed to meet me on a Tuesday. On Wednesday, they sent our information out to each of us. It arrived on Thursday. We spoke on Friday, and we met on Saturday. So we
So
just
that's your
went bang,
daughter?
bang, bang,
Was your
bang.
daughter the oldest?
No, she was the youngest.
She was the
And she was
youngest.
the one that came up first in the searches. And I think because she'd never married and she was still in Brisbane.
Okay.
I
So
don't
when
know
you
the
go back
whys.
in your story to where you were at the doctor's house, the same situation happened to me. I was pregnant in 1969. I was sent to live with a family, 2 adults, 2 children, and look after the children, unpaid. You got your room and board. My dad would pick me up every Sunday to take me home for dinner, but he wouldn't speak to me. He didn't speak to me in the car on the way home or on the car back to him. The only thing that broke us was a friend of mine would come for dinner on the Sundays, and that kind of broke the ice so that he would speak. And I often wondered, well, now when I think about it, I wonder if he was more disappointed in me or more disappointed in himself, because the situation had happened. And unfortunately, he's gone now, so I never get the chance to ask him that. But I followed your journey along the way. It was 2017 when I actually was able to find my son. So I know, I feel for you and I empathize with you for everything that you've gone through for all of this. And finding your daughter has to be so exciting. What
It was. It
what
was.
was the emotions that you felt when you first met her?
I think all of them: fear, happiness, joy. What if she doesn't like me? What if? And it was like, stop it, die. So I went and bought a beautiful little miniature rose, which I wanted to give her for prosperity and our meeting. And I bought a card and wrote a beautiful message to her adoptive mum, thanking her for giving Sue the life that I couldn't. So
Adoption is very. Some people appreciate adoption and the foster care system, and some people have very hard feelings towards it. When you were living your life and going through all of this, when you decided to search for your children, what prompted you to, not just the light bulb, was it your faith in God, or or was it something that just said inside me, I have to try to find my children?
Well, I think that spark started it, and that was the shock. And then I thought, oh my goodness. And then I think that once you make a decision, I think it's like your faith, the universe, things start to happen, to fall into place. I think when you take the step and you've done the work, and I think that's a thing too. I've had people say to me, oh, it's okay for you, your story turned out okay. But what about all the ones that don't? And I said, yes, I know that's true. I can only share what happened to me. But I believe that the self-development work I've done over these 20 odd years helped make me the woman that I needed to be to meet my 2 children. And I believe that that's why it went so smoothly. Does that answer your question?
It does. What's a nugget of truth that you could give somebody that's listening to have faith and look and say, okay, I am wanting to find my children that I gave up to adoption or foster care, and have the courage to look them up?
What is a tip that I would give them?
A nugget of truth.
A nugget of truth? That to believe in yourself. And I think when you believe in yourself, and all those negatives that happened in your past, whatever they happen to be, they're just somebody else's opinion. You can choose to be the person that you want to be. And I chose to be that person so that I could be the person I needed to be to meet them. So I think having that belief in yourself and then doing the work, doing that self-development work, whatever form that takes. Mine covered a whole range of things, including faith, belief in the universe, journaling, programs, NLP, all sorts of things where I just had to take my courage in my hands and step up and speak out. The
Yeah,
first time I broke
wow.
I
It's
agree with you on that, Di, because I did the same thing. I went through some personal growth, and I always knew that I was going to look, but it was taking the step to actually do it.
yeah,
Because mine was a closed adoption, the chance of finding him was slim to none. But luckily, they had changed the laws and made that so that people could find out the information regarding the child.
mm-hmm.
And my husband passed away in 2015. My dad passed away 2016. And while I was looking after my dad, I found a letter from the adoption agency from dated 2004 where they were looking for information about me, which we never actually gave them. But my dad kept the letter. And that was my starting journey for finding my son. It took a year before they sent me a letter saying that they couldn't find him, but his name was Dwayne Tabinski. And I was able to research him on Google, because that's what you do when you got a name, right? I just
Yeah,
Googled him.
that's right.
And I was so grateful his name was not John Smith, and that I could find him. And it was funny, it came out with a post from a real estate agent who had just sold a house in Nashville to a Dwayne Tabinski. And it was in blue. So I clicked on it and it took me to his Facebook page, which said he was born in Winnipeg, Manitoba, moved to Kansas, and was now in Nashville. And I gave birth to him in Winnipeg. So that was how I ended up reaching him. It took a while because when I connected with him on Facebook, he didn't answer me.
Yeah.
But we ended up connecting and meeting. And like you, the day that I actually spoke to him the first time, or the day that he sent me a message saying it would be really okay to call, I was scared.
Yeah.
I just wondered what I was getting myself into. What Pandora's box had I opened? What was going to be the results? Does he want to talk to me? Is he going to like me? Is he going to hate me? Or is he angry at me? And I was afraid, but the following morning, I got a message from him through Facebook saying it would be really okay to call with a phone number. And it was just the way it was worded that gave me the strength to give him that call and go ahead.
The way the organisation that I work through is they send out a generic email first to see if you want contact. And for me, I wanted to use third-party intervention because then there's no pressure from me. So it was between post-adoption support and Sue and David later. So if Sue had said no, it wouldn't have happened. So I did also in that self-development stuff while I was working with post-adoption was I did a lot of work around rejection. What would happen if she said no? So that I was prepared and that I wouldn't fall in a hole. So that was a really important part of the step for me. And then, we met on and off, and I waited a couple of years, and then I thought, I'm ready now to search for my son, for David. And he lives in far north Queensland on the coast, in Cairns. And, but I didn't know that at the time. So my partner and I had set off on a van trip, and we were going, doing the half lap of Australia, going down the east coast, along the bottom and right up through the centre. So we were at a very western, out in the middle of the sticks place when I got the phone call to say that David was open to meeting me, to speaking to me. And I was so excited. So we were heading straight up the top up to Darwin, and then we were going to come down a little bit and back into Queensland and home. So we got talking, and we chatted a couple of times as we were travelling. And the night that we got, and as we were travelling, he eventually got to the point of saying, well, look, I'm really happy to meet you if you want to come home via Cairns. Well, it was about 1,800 kilometres out of our way. But my partner was more than happy to do that. So, what's 1,800 kilometres. So we made the decision to do that. But the night we got to Darwin, which is the very tip of the Northern Territory in Aussie, I got a text from David saying, "Are you in Darwin yet?" And I thought, that's an odd thing to say. And I replied and said, "Yes, why do you ask?" And he said, "Because I'm in Darwin too. Do you want a coffee in the morning?" And it was like, oh. Now, that's the universe bringing us together. We were just travelling, no set agenda. He had no intentions of being in Darwin, but he was with a group of men who bet online, and they were going to Darwin because the big horse race, the Darwin Cup, was on the next day, which we don't follow the horses, so we didn't know that. And on the a couple of days prior to that, one of the guys that was going had a heart attack and couldn't travel, so they rang David and said, "Do you want the ticket?" So, you know, that's the universe, and that's that belief. The universe was conspiring to bring us together. So we had that meeting then, and then we went across to Cairns and spent probably a week with them. And that was that journey. Now, in amongst all this journey, when I've written about it, I've said that original doctor's home that I went to as the pregnant teenager, I couldn't remember the doctor's name and I couldn't remember the address. And there's another organisation called Jigsaw who do similar things. They connect families. And I did a podcast interview with them about a year ago. And then finally, just out of the blue, I get a message from someone called Richard, and he said, "Di, I'd really like to talk to you. I've just listened to your podcast." So on speaking to him, I find out that while he's an Australian, he lives in the Netherlands, but he still listened to the podcast. And he listened to what I said about this home. I described the house, and he had traced his birth mother, and she lived in England. And he said, "I think there's a bit of a similarity. I'll go and, I'll contact her and come back to you." Came back. This lady in England, who is his birth mother, was at the same doctor's home as me. She was there directly after me. So, the doctor and his wife made quite a thing of getting free household help and free babysitters through using pregnant girls. And I know now of 4 people who were at that home.
How was that home?
What are the odds of someone, an Australian who lives in the Netherlands, hears a podcast a year after it's recorded, goes to his birth.
Things fall into place, right? They're all meant to be.
They just fall into place. So that's just been absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible.
And there's no such thing as coincidences. For example, my son, his adopted mum, she and I worked at the same insurance company at the same time, though we didn't know each other. She worked in the hospitality industry, and I did as well. And then she managed a furniture store for 30 years. And my husband and I owned and operated a custom furniture manufacturing and retail store for 46 years. So the parallels between us were the same. She was also a redhead, which I was back then. Matt's definitely a redhead.
Absolutely.
But there were so many coincidences. And when Dwayne and his wife were flying from Nashville to Winnipeg to go and see the family, and I was joining them, believe it or not, when I got on the plane to go, I was in a seat and there were 2 seats beside me vacant. And Dwayne and his wife were in 2 seats further back in the plane. The plane was full except for those 2 vacant seats beside me so that they could come up and sit with me and talk. Like, just things kept falling into place the way they were meant to be. And everything, it was incredible the way it actually all played out.
Yeah, it is. It's just absolutely amazing. And then the year after I met Sue, I wrote my 3rd book and published it called Speak Out. Now, it has a lot of, it's from suppression to expression in 9 vital steps, a practical guide to making your voice matter. And that's what I'm about, your voice matters. And a lot of the things that I used, skills that I developed and used in my own journey, are in this book. So that was another big part of my journey.
When you went to start writing your book, and everybody has a story to tell. Everybody could write a book. So what was the most exciting part of writing your book?
I think when you get it in your hand, the day the books arrive,
Yeah.
you've done all the work, it's all over, and it's gone off to the printers. And the day that the box arrives and you unpack the box, and there it is. It's in your hot little hand, all those words, all those hours and the time that you've invested in presenting your story. There it is, right there in front of you. That is very exciting.
That's wonderful. For some listeners that we have, can you help educate the individuals that don't understand Aussie culture for the social system, or what was the social system in the past to what is in place at the moment?
As regards adoption, do you mean?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, back at the time, when I was that young teenager, when I gave birth to Sue and David, it was adoption was a closed book. It was secrecy, shrouded in secrecy, never to be divulged, never to be discussed. Get on with life, get away from it. You will never, ever meet that child. And then I can't quite remember. I don't remember when they released those rules, but it was well before I made my choice. It was probably maybe 20 years ago, might be 30 years ago. They relaxed the rules and they allowed people to search. Now, I don't know how it goes if you search on your own behalf. I don't know what you can get from births, deaths and marriages, because I went through the third party through an organisation. And I did that so that if there was rejection, I would be a bit removed from it. And I figured that they had the process. So the process for both post-adoption and Jigsaw is they send a generic letter. And if they don't get any response from that, they send a registered letter so that you've got to sign for it.
Mm-hmm.
And then once they get that registered letter, if they make contact with the organisation, they have a talk about it and they say, well, we found your mother, your birth mother. Would you like to make contact with her? And then they say yes or no. So then that organisation comes back to me and says, yes, they're happy to contact. No, they're not. And for me, I was very fortunate because both Sue and David were willing to contact me. Now, I was also prepared an email while the searching was going on, so that as soon as they said yes, the email would go straight out to them. And that email really broke the ice. It just gave a very short description of who I was, what happened and why it happened.
Mm-hmm.
And neither Sue nor David had any idea that young girls were treated how I was treated back in the 60s. They had no comprehension. So they had no angst towards me. They were interested to hear what had happened. They were interested to hear who and what I was. And both of them had happy upbringing. They had really good adoptive parents.
Would you be able to explain a little bit of the culture of Australia and how back in the day and then a little bit now? Because some of the listeners that we have, are mythicized, saying, gosh darn it, she's from Aussie. That's just full of, just a bunch of crocodiles and sharks and a bunch of Barbies and kangaroos. People don't know the culture of Australia except what's in the movies and on TV shows.
Yeah, and I guess it's the same. Australians probably have the same opinion of Americans, and I got a very different view once I visited it too. So where I grew up was a small country town. It was sugar industry related. Went to school, I walked to school. It was very patriarchal society. The men had all the say. It was a big thing to hop on a train and go to the big smoking. I lived about an hour's drive out of Brisbane. So, Mum and I would get on the rail motor and we'd go down to Brisbane and we'd spend the day walking around the big city, and that was so exciting. I'd go down to my grandmother at the beach and walk along the waterfront, and she used to have ulcers on her legs, so she'd bathe her legs, and I'd be chasing the soldier crabs. It was a big thing to go to the annual show, and you got a new outfit to go to the show every year.
Wow.
Does that describe life a little bit? It was
That does help. And from Sydney, because I understand miles, and most Americans will understand
Oh, you will
miles.
too. Yeah, I can't convert.
Yeah, no, I'm not asking you to convert, but compare. Australia is just gigantic.
Huge. It's huge.
Yeah. How can you tell us what the distance is from where you grew up and then where your life began from, marrying your husband and having your children, from where Sydney is kind of located, so people get a mental picture?
All right. So looking at the map of Australia, Sydney's pretty much in the middle of New South Wales on the coast.
Okay.
So if you go up to the border of New South Wales and Queensland, Brisbane is just above that. So it's in the southeast corner of Australia. I lived in a little town that was 1 hour's drive north of there.
Okay.
And then when I married, I moved halfway up the Queensland coast to Mackay, which would probably be 1,000 kilometres thereabouts.
Okay.
And then Cairns is probably another 1,000 kilometres from there.
Okay.
So no, it's a really big state.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah. Does that make sense?
It does make sense, and that's really helpful.
Yeah. And we don't have kangaroos jumping down the main street. We really don't.
Well, gosh darn it! I thought you guys had them for
I'm
pets.
sorry to ruin your day.
Here in Canada,
So-
they think we live in igloos.
The first
So
time I
no,
went to an International Toastmasters convention in 1985, there were some Canadians there, and they asked me, did I eat 3 meals a day? I mean, I don't know what they thought we did. And they thought that there were kangaroos jumping up this, and I think we can blame Paul Hogan for that, because he came across as that rough Aussie bloke. But we're quite civilised actually.
yeah, I know everything from Crocodile Dundee.
Life is not like that. But we do have lots of, there is lots of bush and there's lots of wild, areas, and it's just massive. Yeah. A couple of years ago, my partner and I, we did a lap around Australia, and we were away for close on a year, and we did about 40,000 kilometres.
Wow.
So
I'm
what
glad
type
I
of
did it. I don't want to
relationship?
do it again.
What
Sorry?
type of a relationship do you have with your children now? And have your son and daughter met each other?
They've met each other briefly, but they don't have a real relationship as such. It's not as strong with my daughter as what it is with my relationship is not as strong with my daughter as it is with my son. She's pulled back a bit, and maybe she's got, and I'm not sure whether she's avoiding me or whether she's got what she wants out of it. It's gone on for a while, and I thought, I think it's probably time if I just ask her, have you got what you want out of it? Because I don't want to annoy her. Because I've always said I would meet them on their terms, because I've come into their lives very late. My son, who lives in Cairns, of course, distance prevents easy access there. But we're in contact on the phone, and we've been up to Cairns since then and stayed with them, and they've been down in Brisbane. They'll be down next week, so we're having breakfast with them one day next week.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
And did you get grandchildren through this?
Married, whereas my son did. And I don't know whether that makes a difference. And his wife, David's wife, is just delightful. And his adoptive mother was keen to meet me. So I have met her, and she gave me about 10 or a dozen photos of David at different stages of growing up, which I really appreciated.
Yeah, Dwayne's mom sent me, as soon as she knew about me, she sent me some photos of him growing
It's lovely,
up.
isn't it?
Yes. It was really, just makes you feel like you did everything right, that the choice you made was the right one.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
so do you have grandchildren?
Yes, David's got 2 children. They're in their early 20s.
So soon you'll have great-grandchildren.
Soon there'll be great-grandchildren. Oh, well, I've got great-grandchildren on the children from Les's side, my hubby's side. But 3 of his 3 children have gone to heaven since Les died. So when my last stepson died last November, it was like the end of an era. So it was unpacking that 55 years or something of family life and just end of story. So I've really taken that fairly, it's been pretty tough. Yeah. So I've had a very quiet time over the Christmas period, but I'm climbing back out now. And I've got this speech to get going. Oh my God. It's the 14th of March.
You'll do just fine on that speech.
After the recording, if you want me to read it to you, I'm happy to read it to you. But anyway, let's on with the discussion. So, have I answered all the questions?
Well, what do you want people, especially those impacted by adoption, to understand most?
That if you don't put yourself out there and ask, you'll never know. That period and that time of completion, I think, is so important. And for me, it's been like completing circles. And that's what I think that we aim for, because we all need to know where we've come from. And the more we can appreciate that. And, sometimes it doesn't work. You might just meet someone, say, okay, well, I've got that information. I can move on now. It's like relationships of any kind. We don't know where they're going to go unless when you've got the vested interest. Are you the best are you putting forward the best version of yourself in whatever relationship you're in? And that's what I've tried to do with Sue and David, and with my other relationships as well.
Do you feel that there are many more women out there like you and I?
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Don't stand up and tell their story?
And it was obviously the welfare workers' answer of the day. I've met many mature women, or women sort of around my vintage, who were also told to go nursing, get out of society's way, because no decent man would ever want them. So, that was pretty much the standard reply, official reply at that time.
And
again, there was no welfare, there was nothing to support you. So I knew that I wouldn't be able to support a child. I'm not saying that the children shouldn't have been adopted, because I certainly wasn't in a place where I could have looked after them. But the process and how it was handled could most certainly have been handled much better, not to leave the birth mother feeling like she was worthless, because that's not true.
And that's such a horrible experience that you had. And that's not a normal experience that it is nowadays. But it was a part of the culture back then.
At that time, yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. And we have to realize that we can't put today's values on yesterday's actions.
Right.
What they did, because that's how society was. It was horrible, but that's how it was. I can't sit in that. Well, I can, but I choose not to sit in the corner and play the blame game and say, it was all awful back then. Yeah, it was. But I've got to be big enough. You've got to be big enough in yourself to climb out of that and say, that's how it was then. This is who I am today.
I have a question that's just been burning a hole in my pocket. How, two-part, how did you recover from the physical violence that happened the first time around? And, how did you maintain mental strength? So that's the first part. And then what would you tell someone that was physically abused, and how to move forward, even that those type of actions should never be upon someone?
I have no idea really how I had the guts to get on with life, because there was no support, there was nowhere to go, and I think I just buried everything and thought, I've just got to pretend it didn't happen and move on. And I think that's why I was so slow moving on, and that's why I got caught out the second time, because I still, in my mind, I still thought I was worthless no matter what I did. And it was just the shock after the second birth, and I thought, that's it, I'm done. Nursing is going to be it. Get on with it. And then a while later, out of the blue, I made my husband made contact with me. Well, he was a blind date, actually. He rang the nurses' quarters looking for a date. And that was the beginning of it. But he was a beautiful, kind man, and we had a wonderful relationship, and he did a lot towards restoring my self-worth. He was the first man who really treated me with respect.
Oh, that's amazing. What would you tell someone? What would you tell someone that's been through similar abuse and physical abuse of that caliber? It's so hard for me not even to say the word. To give that those women, and sometimes actually men get.
It happens to men as well.
Yeah. What would you tell someone in that position to help them, stay motivated and to inspire them?
To reach out. I mean, in Australia, there are many organisations and many charities now that support women who have been through domestic violence. They're everywhere. Any community centre, any library, anywhere will be able to guide you towards any woman towards getting help. It depends on whether you're ready to accept it, because it's fairly well known, certainly in Australia, and I think it's a worldwide thing, that women will go back because that's all they know and that's what they think they're worth. It's only when they suddenly realise they get to that point. But there are many charities and organisations, and I help out with one called Broken to Brilliant, and they run programs for women who've been through domestic violence and they're rebuilding their lives. So I do a little bit of help. I do a little bit with them. And there's another organisation called DARE, and they sort of do the same type of thing. And it's all about that rebuilding and giving the women the courage. And it's amazing how you see these women who've been through horrific situations blossom after they've got that confidence and that self-worth restored.
So no matter if you're in the United States, Australia, Canada, whatever state or country you're listening from, if you feel the need to reach out for help, to reach out, no matter how difficult it is.
Yeah. And when I say reach out, and people have got this fear of reaching out because they think I think women think they're going to be judged. And that was so in the day. But I don't think that's so today. Certainly not once you reach out to organisations. There is so much support out there. It's just incredible. The sad part is it doesn't seem to be doing much about domestic violence in itself per se. It's still happening. I don't know how we fix that. All we can do is fix the women who come forward and are prepared to have a crack. And I just love to see the growth in these women who've been through stuff.
That's wonderful.
When you talk about women today, single mums are very prominent, single dads as well. The single mums, some of them are 15, 16, and they're still looked upon with respect compared to the way we were looked on back then. And they are keeping their child and figuring out a way to handle it. So should adoption be more of an option for those people?
I think so.
How do you feel about just the way the difference between then and now?
Oh, well, I think that, if these young girls are going to keep their babies, most certainly they need to be supported so that they can provide a stable background for the child so that the cycle's not going to be repeated. I was involved for quite a number of years with a program in this town north of Brisbane where I was living, And that was that they had an area where girls who had fallen pregnant and had the baby, they could come back and complete their senior years, 2 years at school. They had a creche there for their children. And it was an experimental program, and I don't know whether it ever got continued on because I don't do any work in schools anymore. But it was an amazing program because these young lasses had made a mistake, but they still had the opportunity to complete their schooling. Their children, their babies were looked after, and they could then get an education and get on and do something with their lives. Programs like that are just amazing and should be encouraged more and more.
I agree with you totally on that, because there's a lot of young girls that end up just as waitressing or doing something that when they have more to give than that, but because they have a child, that they're relegated to those kind of positions when they really have so much more in them.
One of the biggest issues here in Australia at the moment is housing. And the cost of homes and renting. So that's making it really difficult for people who are on welfare to be able to afford somewhere, to find someone first off, find somewhere, and then secondly to be able to afford that rent. So that's a major issue, but that's got nothing directly to do with adoption. But it is young girls who, they're not going to have money behind them unless they've got family support. And while they're studying or doing whatever they're doing, they're not going to be able to hold down any sort of work to supplement their income. So it is a big challenge.
Matt, do you have any final questions before we close?
So I have a personal question, and this is more geared towards the household. When you had your children, how important was it to have a stable belief in something greater, or was it a schedule that you guys had? That you had a sense of connection and a sense of belonging.
Well, for me, that was nursing. And while it was meant as a punishment, get out of society's way type thing, that gave me exactly that. It gave me a sense of structure. There was discipline. There was lots of discipline. Nursing was very tough in the 1960s. But that discipline and that structure, that allowed me to grow, to start the growing. But it still didn't, because I hadn't done any self-development work, because I didn't even know that word. It probably wasn't around back then. In my head, I still had the worthless thing, but on the outside, I was the confident nurse doing what I had to do. And the things that I learned through my nursing have stood me in stead for all of my life.
Well, I am so grateful to have the pleasure of meeting you. I hope we reconnect with you many, many times over. And God bless. I am so grateful for you coming on here and sharing your wisdom and your story.
Thank you so much. And I might add, these two organisations, Post Adoption and Jigsaw, they run programs for men as well. It's not just for women. Yeah. So I just wanted to slip that little bit in so that you realise that it's not just female orientated.
And this is directly in Australia, correct?
Yeah, this is in Australia. Yeah, Post Adoption is a Queensland organisation. Jigsaw is an Australian organisation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Di. I really appreciate you being here. Thank you for your courage, your voice, and your generosity in sharing this story. If you're listening tonight and carrying a story you were never allowed to tell, I want you to know that your silence was never consent. Your pain was never a failure, and your story still matters. It's never too late to speak, never too late to search, and never too late to heal.
Absolutely. That's a beautiful conclusion, Janet. Thank you. I'm honoured that you've invited me onto your podcast.
Again, thank you so much, Di. This is Roots and Branches Adoption Stories, where every story matters and every voice deserves to be heard. This is Janet and Matt saying thank you very much for being with us tonight and for listening.
Thank you for tuning in to Roots and Branches Adoption Stories, where every tree has roots, every life has branches, and every adoption has a story. Got an adoption story you want to tell? Want to learn more about adoption stories? Then visit rootsandbranchesadoptionstories.com.